Hi, I'm Cheryl Spicer, Countywide Museum Manager for the Montgomery County Department of Parks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Dennis Doster, and I'm Director of the MNC PBC Black History Program of the Department of Parks and Recreation, Prince George's County. And we would like to welcome you to our first ever bi-county virtual Maryland Emancipation Day celebration.
So this year we are celebrating together our annual celebration of the abolition of slavery in Maryland, which is something we've been doing here in Montgomery County Parks for over 20 years. And we're so excited to have our Prince George's County folks with us this year. What's coming up next, Dennis?
So, Cheryl, we are going to start, as we try to start every Black History program, with the Black National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing, as performed by Mr. Brandon Felder.
So this year is really special for us also here in Montgomery County, as it's Oakley Cabin's 25th anniversary. Now, Oakley Cabin African American Museum and Park is one of the oldest historical parks within our system that celebrates the history of African Americans in Montgomery County. And because we haven't been able to be on site and experience the park live, I thought I'd just share a few of the images of some of our outstanding and exciting volunteers who share their passion with us throughout the year. And in some of the images, you'll see that their activities range from helping us out every other weekend for regular weekend tours, special events, and to even donning historic costumes so that they are bringing to life historic figures that are important to Oakley Cabin's history as well as Maryland's history. In the more recent years, they've been joining us doing outreach programs and also helping to recruit new members to our merry band of history lovers. So next year, we're going to hope to see everybody back on site where we can enjoy this type of celebration and others within both of our parks.
Performance was at the historic Dorsey Chapel in Glendale, Maryland, which is one of 3 historic facilities managed by the MNC PPC Black History Program. And it's so fitting that we had our performance there because African American churches were one of the first types of organizations that African Americans built after the end of slavery. And so now we're going to go back to Dorsey Chapel, where we'll have a special performance by hip hop artist Conscience the MC.
Brainstorms and I needed some lightning, much more brighter than lightning. You see, take away all the clouds for a brighter day. And I pray that you help me face all of the facts and keep me from falling back. And I pray that you hold me close so I receive my scope, so I can see what matters most. When I reach the gates on my arrival day, I pray you'll turn me away. I pray you'll turn me away.
What a powerful performance. The next gentleman that we're going to be hearing from is part of a long-standing tradition of presenters who participate in our annual Emancipation celebration here at Oakley Cabin. Here in Montgomery Parks, we've been celebrating this Emancipation celebration for over 20 years now, and Mr. Hawley has been with us the entire time. Every year, he has brought to us this rich and important presentation that grounds us in the historical significance of this occasion. Mr. Charles Ben Hawley is a reenactor with the 54th Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry Regiment, Company B, also a descendant of a U.S. colored troop. And he has been with us at Oakley Cabin, as I said, for over 25 years. And he delivers every year the reading of the amendment to the state constitution that abolishes slavery in Maryland on November the 1st, 1864. So let's hear from Mr. Hawley.
The Emancipation Proclamation, which freed the slaves in the states that had seceded, went into effect on January 1st, 1863. But Maryland didn't act until 1864, when it held a referendum. And even then, the outcome wasn't at all certain. The vote tipped in favor of abolition only after the absentee ballots of soldiers fighting for the North were counted. The final tally was 30,174 in favor of freeing the slaves to 27,799 against 375 votes. Very close. I bring this to your attention for two reasons. One is why I wear the uniform of a Civil War soldier whose great-grandfather fought for the Civil War. I'm a Civil War reenactor, and I stand proudly in support of these soldiers that made the difference in this election. Isn't it ironic that on Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020, is Election Day, and our vote is equally as important as those Civil War soldiers who voted for the abolition of slavery. So my point here is vote. Make sure you get out and vote. On November 1st, 1864, Maryland slaves were declared free, only a few months before Congress would approve the 13th Amendment. You see, Governor Bradford didn't wait for the 13th Amendment. He took this proactive step ahead of time and freed the slaves here in Maryland. Let's celebrate November 1st as Maryland Emancipation Day. Texas has its Juneteenth. We deserve to have our own holiday. Senator Ellis in Charles County has a bill in the legislature as we speak, Senate Bill 76. So support that when you can and when you will, and let's make this thing happen. Before I read the words from the 1864 Maryland Constitution, take a step back in history. Imagine this is 1864, and farmers and families and people gathered around, most usually the general store. Literacy was at a low rate in this time, even for whites. So when you got your news, you couldn't turn on CNN, you couldn't open up the Washington Post, you had to get it from everybody. And with that in mind, I'll begin. The following is a transcript of the actual words used by the then Governor August Bradford. The 1864 Maryland Constitution included the following clauses. We, the people of the state of Maryland, grateful to Almighty God for our civil and religious liberty, and taking into serious consideration the means of establishing a good constitution in this state for the sure foundation and more permanently security thereof. Declare, Article 1, that we hold it to be self-evident that all men are created equally free, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, the enjoyment of the proceeds of their own labor, and the pursuit of happiness. Article 24, that hereafter, in this state, there shall be neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except in the punishment of crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, and all persons held to service or labor as slaves are hereby declared free. It was approved by popular vote and went into effect on November 1st, 1864. We's free.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Maryland's Emancipation Celebration here at Oakley Cabin African American Museum and Park. So this afternoon we have the pleasure of Tony Cohen, a renowned historian, native of Montgomery County, and our neighbor, the director of Button Farm Living History Center in Germantown, who's joining us this afternoon for our program. Tony, welcome back home.
Yes, this is home. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. So we've just had the pleasure of hearing Ben Hawley read the amendment to the Maryland State Constitution, which abolished slavery. So my first question for you is, how does Maryland's abolishment of slavery via a state constitution impact its new African American communities?
Well, that's a great question, and it would have been fantastic to be a reporter on the farms and the plantations at the time and get that immediate reaction. I guess the first thing is to keep in mind that this was an amendment to a legal document. So there was no flowery language. There was no proclamation, so to speak.
So very different than the Emancipation Proclamation, where there was a celebration, the reading of it, and all of that.
Exactly. And even the Emancipation Proclamation was something that had a national impact. But of course, in those places across the nation, that was not in the hands of the federal government.
Absolutely. So
it was symbolic. Something closer must have been the emancipation of enslaved people in D.C., in the District of Columbia in 1862, when the Northern Congress abolished slavery there. That was celebrated widely in the streets, became a tradition that is still celebrated today. It's a district holiday.
Yes.
So that had probably the most potent reverberation. But for enslaved people here in Maryland, they could see those two previous acts, and they must have known, irrespective of how the war might turn out, whether we would be one nation or two, that at least here in Maryland, their lot had been cast towards freedom, and that freedom was on the horizon. It was something that they could look forward to for their decades and centuries of service.
I see. So it would have taken a period of time for the word to roll out throughout communities there after November the 1.
Absolutely. And one of the interesting things, and unfortunately, I'm not even sure if there is such a thing as emancipation studies, but there really should be, because this is an area where scholars have not put a lot of attention to. But there are some accounts of people learning about the change to the Constitution and immediately releasing their people from service, while others held on until the actual 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution abolished the practice.
Absolutely. So my next question is, at historic sites such as Oakley Cabin, Button Farm, other 19th century sites that interpret the African American experience, we focus on how these newly emancipated African Americans lived day to day during the Reconstruction era, that period following the end of the Civil War. Can you share a little bit of why this historical period is so important to our understanding of the historic African American experience?
Yes, Reconstruction, first of all, is a period that has, up until recently, been vastly understudied in the canon of American history. The African Americans, upon being freed by the 13th Amendment, didn't enjoy all of the benefits of freedom, but certainly moved into all areas of civic engagement. So, for instance, in the Deep South, where there were large populations of African Americans, you see by the year 1870, African Americans, some of whom had been enslaved just years before, taking their seats in state and national legislatures, because they were being voted in by these, black majority power blocks. It was a bit different here in Maryland, and there wasn't much here to be reconstructed, except the mindset of the people. And so in communities across Montgomery County, newly freed people would have had to face and figure out the transition from being slave laborers to wage laborers. What did that look like? Who did they work for? Many of the farms and plantations where they had been held still needed the labor, still needed the crops brought in, still needed the skilled artisans, mechanics, blacksmiths, cooks, all of those occupations remained, but had to be paid for. So that's just one example of the strange transition that would have been felt. I think another thing that's important to know is that once the wall of slavery came down, people had a greater freedom to move around and to reunite. So families that had been scattered, across the landscape could now come back together and renew those family ties, and that must have been double freedom.
Yes, to be reunited with your family after so many years and even generations in some cases.
Yes.
You mentioned something about Maryland not having to go through a Reconstruction. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so Reconstruction really referred to a Marshall Plan before, to borrow a 20th century phrase and take it back in time. But Maryland wasn't a war-torn landscape. And the biggest battles of the Civil War didn't take place here. So there wasn't a lot of physical infrastructure to rebuild. But certainly the psychic landscape had to be rebuilt. How do people who spent their entire existence in service to others, proclaim their independence.
Yes.
And how do those people who wielded the power relinquish control? So that would have been a major factor in those years following the Civil War, and a difficult terrain to navigate.
Because Maryland, as a border state, there were a few. How did we rank in those border states that abolished slavery, since the Emancipation Proclamation freed the Confederate states and those that had seceded the Union? Where did Maryland fit in was it the first one, second one, third one?
Yeah, yes, it was the first of the border states to abolish slavery, only preceded by the District of Columbia, which was, not a border state. It was surrounded by Maryland and Virginia, both slave-holding territories. But the moment was significant, and even abolitionists in the North, like communities in Philadelphia, came out in celebration over Maryland's emancipation. So it was a profound moment, and its impact is still being uncovered and discovered.
Okay, so Tony, this Emancipation celebration that began here in Montgomery County, how did it spread to other counties throughout the state?
Yes, well, almost immediately, and you could say like wildfire.
Wow.
Yeah, it was the mid-90s. We started Emancipation Day. Prince George's County's parks picked it up. After a while, they ran with Juneteenth, because that was their tradition. But then places across the state like Baltimore started picking up Emancipation, and within the past decade, Emancipation effort to have it recognized as an official Maryland state holiday started taking shape. And then it became even more popular.
Right. I remember we had a large celebration in 2014 for the 150th anniversary of the amendments passage. Yeah, it was a big celebration. It was huge.
Absolutely.
So what do you see for the future for celebrating the Emancipation celebration, especially for us within Montgomery Parks and in Prince George's Parks and Rec? What do you see for our future as we grow the celebration?
Well, first of all, I have to say that the celebration in Montgomery Parks has not only been a success for the park system itself, but Parks has been a great steward in kind of telescoping that celebration throughout other county sites. So, for instance, Button Farm Living History Center in Germantown, we do it there. Peerless Rockville is doing an Emancipation Day celebration. Henson, all these different sites, both in and outside of parks, are really taking up the cause, and it's because of the outreach of parks.
Yes, and one site in particular that we can't forget that's been celebrating almost, if not as long as Oakley Cabin, that I know of, has been the Sandy Springs Slave Museum and African Art Gallery right here, their neighbor, right next door. I know for the past decade and even longer, we've been hosting companion sort of celebrations. You do part of the day there, you do the afternoon at Oakley, or Sunday there, Saturday here, and we've continued that and at Woodlawn Manor Cultural Park, where we've done our hikes, the Underground Railroad Experience Trail hikes.
Absolutely, and I have to say, even though Oakley Cabin was the first Parks African American historical site open to the public, the Sandy Springs Slavery Museum preceded it and was a great inspiration, because that told us that there is an audience in this county for Black history.
Well, Tony, thank you so much for coming out and joining us this year. We are so looking forward to next year, where Parks will be celebrating 25 years within both of our park systems of celebrating this really important state holiday.
My
And
pleasure.
so, thank you. That wraps it up for us this evening, and thank you all for joining us for our Maryland Emancipation celebration.
So thank you, Mr. Hawley, and thank you, Mr. Cohen, for your insightful words. Now we will go back to Dorsey Chapel, where we'll have a powerful performance by Ms. Shonda Brown Wilson, accompanied by Mr. Brandon Felder. What an awesome performance. We just like to thank all of our performers again, Ms. Shonda Brown Wilson, Conscience, the MC, and Mr. Brandon Felder. We've just really enjoyed having you all be a part of our first virtual bi-county Maryland Emancipation Day celebration. And it's definitely been a great week of programming. And so I must acknowledge on the Prince George's County side, all of my great colleagues, Miss Brittany Drakeford of the Planning Department, Miss Sam Ferris of the Riversdale House Museum in Riverdale Park, Maryland. And then, of course, the Black History Program staff. So our Black History Program assistant, Mr. Alexander Brooks. And of course, my right hand, the one that I can't do anything without, the historian for the Black History Program, Miss Artura Jackson. And so also I know great colleagues as well worked with this on the Montgomery County side as well.
Yes, we absolutely want to thank our longstanding partners, Mr. Ben Hawley, the folks at the Sandy Springs Slave Museum and African Art Gallery, Tony Cohen and his fabulous crew over at Button Farm Living History Center in Germantown. And for our folks here in Montgomery Parks, we would not be able to have shown you the fabulous footage and everything without our new staff for the Josiah Henson Museum and Park. Amani Haynes is our new education program manager there, Mark Thorns, our new site manager, and my right and left hand, Tammy Shepard, who helps out with the historic programs, and our other staff that have supported Oakley Cabin over the years. We just could not have done it without them and making this another successful yet virtual program. So as we close out today's program, I just want to give a shout out to my co-host, Dr. Dennis Doster, for a most insightful lecture that he gave us on Friday, which was part of a week of dynamic programming. We had the opportunity to share workshops, to teach about genealogy, hear beautiful musical performances, other insightful lectures and presentations, and that's just a hint of what's going to be waiting for us next year when we celebrate within MNCPPC 25 years of Maryland's emancipation celebrations between Prince George's and Montgomery County parks. We're sending you off this week to follow in that legacy of our forefathers to go and vote. We've learned how critical it is, and we've understood the importance of this abolition of slavery in Maryland that happened in 1864, but we got to follow through and get to the polls this week and make sure that our voices count. So everyone, have a great week, stay safe, and we'll see you back at the parks next year.